This video is sponsored by Trade Coffee. I'll tell you more about them later. How do the 16 Myers-Briggs personalities see the world differently? I wrote it on the board so that you wouldn't forget what the video's about. So in this video, I'm gonna go through how the different letters in your type indicate how you perceive the world differently than other types. And if you've missed the other two videos in this series, how do the types communicate differently and how do the 16 personalities make decisions differently, you can check out that playlist in this card right here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through two different letters in particular in the type code and explain how that tells us how the different types see the world differently. So first, let's look at J versus P types and how they see the world differently. And just to clarify, when we say see the world, I'm talking about how do they perceive the world? How do they observe the world? Like when they are looking out at everything, how is the information flowing? So we start with the P types. These types, generally, when they are looking at the world, they are trying to gather in as much information as possible. This is especially true with the EP types. The IP types are a little bit more balanced when it comes to this, but both generally, they just feel like they never have enough. They want to just keep gathering more information. They want to perceive even more. The P types really don't like to feel limited. And I mean, no one really likes to feel limited, but I think the funny thing is that the P types feel like they're being limited like all the time. Like if you just ask them to stick to one thing and not keep looking for more information or to keep doing new things, they'll be like, dude, stop trying to limit me. So when the P types look at the information that they have already gathered, they'll be like, this is not enough. I need some more. We need to gather even more. Like, sure, what we've got is great, but the answers are still out there somewhere, and we can't really ever know if we found the answer, so we have to keep looking. It's sort of like a never-ending thing. So this could manifest itself in something very simple, like just wanting to read a lot. But it could also be when you find someone who keeps jumping from thing to thing, like, you know, they take up a new hobby and then like 2 weeks later they're on to another new hobby and drop the first one immediately. That's the sign of someone wanting to keep taking in new rather than sticking with the known. You know, I've mentioned before in other videos that the P types are more spontaneous, and this goes along with that. Because just think about this, the P types don't want to ever limit themselves. So when you make a plan, you're limiting yourself, right? So they want to be spontaneous because they want to be able to follow whatever lead they come across. They're very curious people, so they don't want to feel restricted and like they can't explore. You can think of the P types as being like explorers. They just want to go out there and find what is new. Then we go over to the J types, and it might not surprise you that they are the opposite side of that, where they don't want the new. They don't want to go out and gather. They want to stick with what they know, and they want to get all of their ducks in a row with what they know. And I realize I'm like rhyming here and I didn't really intend to. Now, the IJ types are especially rigid when it comes to this, with like restricting the amount of information they take in and seeing the world through a very narrow lens. And the EJ types are a little bit less crazy with this, but they both still generally will be this way. I mean, what does that mean? Does it mean that the J types are closed-minded? No, but it means that when they're taking in information, it's not a wide net that's been cast. It's very limited, it's very narrow. They don't want to take in more stuff before they've had a chance to really thoroughly process what they already know, the information they already have, over and over again. And I think that's generally the difference here, is that the P types are very broad, but not going into things very deeply, right? They keep gathering because they're just trying to grab it, look at it, move on to the next thing. It's not sitting there with it too much. Where the J types, they won't cast a wide net. It'll be like one thing, and then they'll go really deep into that, really getting all the information they can out of one thing, and then seeing how does it fit with other things that they know. So rather than going from thing to thing and looking for the new, they're saying, how can I take what the known, what I already have, and find new things within that. It's kind of a weird way of looking at the world because it's trying to find new in the old. I mean, also the P-types are weird because they're looking for, they'll have answers right in front of them and be like, no, we still gotta find something else. So while the P-types don't like to be restricted, the J-types like to put restrictions on things. They like things to be kind of narrowed down and not having to deal with a bunch of new stuff, without having to gather, without having to be spontaneous, having things lined up a bit more. And an interesting thing is, you could, with these things in mind, you could say that the P-types view the world as a place where there are constant limitations and people are trying to impose restrictions on them and they're trying to break free of that. Whereas the J-types, if you look at the opposite side of that, they see the world as this place where a bunch of stuff is being thrown at them and they have to stop, put the brakes on and filter it out and get it down into a really narrow stream of information that they can then process over and over. And I want to emphasize, is one better than the other? No, they balance things out. And so one of the important things about personality type, is realizing when you're doing one of these things too often and you need to balance yourself out a bit. If you're being too restrictive or you're being too much of an explorer, you maybe need to, find a middle ground. Next, we'll look at the difference between how intuitives, the N-types, and sensors, the S-types, see the world. And when you pair that up with P or J, you'll be able to figure out how does your type theoretically view the world. But before we do that, let's support this channel and stop really quick for a commercial break. All right, thanks for sitting through that. Let me tell you about this video's sponsor, Trade Coffee. So if you're like me, you drink a lot of coffee, maybe to an excessive amount. And what's great about Trade Coffee is it allows you to try different coffee roasters from around the world. So the way that Trade Coffee works is you take a quiz to kind of fill out your profile of what you like about coffee, what you're looking for, and then you pick how often do you want the coffee delivered, etc. And they'll start sending it right to your doorstep, and then you rate it so that they can continue to tweak your profile and send you even better coffees. The bag I got from Trade is Joe Coffee. I really like it. It's got notes of chocolate, caramel, and molasses, it says here. It tastes really good. Trade guarantees that you're gonna love the coffee on your first order, and if you don't love it, just let them know. They'll ship you a replacement bag for free. For the first 100 people who click the link down in the description, you'll get 30% off your first order from Trade Coffee. Just click that link, take the quiz, and the discount will be automatically applied. Awesome, now let's get back to the video and talk about how do the intuitives and the sensors view the world differently. While we're here, if you're enjoying this video, All right, so let's start with the S-types, the sensor types. And there's some confusion, I think, sometimes when it comes to the types where it's especially intuitive sensor, where it's the sensing types just don't have intuition. They just don't know how to use their intuition, which is not true. Everyone can use sensing and intuition. Everyone has to, or you would be not a functioning human being. It's just, we're talking about preferences, and I like to think of it as when the stakes are high, when the chips are down, when things really matter, what are you going to run to rely on? So when you're seeing the world, what's more important to you? What kind of observations are more important to you? So for the sensing types, what's more important to them are the facts, what's real, what is observable in the real world, the concrete world. So yes, of course, sensing types they have intuition, but when it really matters, they prefer to look at things as what can I actually point to as a fact, rather than what do I just know generally about how these things work in an abstract sense. Like what is the pattern that I have observed with the facts? That's less important to them as what are the actual facts? What are we actually talking about here? And you could argue that this is perhaps, you know, the more prudent thing to do, to like look at what's factually happening. You know, the intuitives, on the other hand, they prefer to look at what are the patterns, like how are things going to unfold based on what I've seen already, rather than what are the actual facts right in front of me. Now, another big difference here, which is related to that, is that the intuitive types, because they are more interested in patterns rather than the actual what's happening A, B, C, D, they are more willing to kind of skip over the concrete facts and just kind of guess ahead to what's going to happen. They'll kind of skim over things sometimes. And the sensing types, they don't like doing that. They see the world in that more concrete way. They rely more on those observations, and so they don't really like having to jump ahead to make that guess. So if we zoom out a bit, you could say that the intuitives view the world in such a way where it's like what is actually happening in the concrete world is not so important. That's secondary, and the real thing to pay attention to is how does it all work together? They're like, what are the connections between things? What is the pattern that is happening with the actual facts? Whereas the sensing types, they see that there are patterns there and whatever, but to them, the more important thing going on in the world is actually what is happening and the details of that. Now, look, I know there's kind of a bias towards intuitives generally on the internet, but the thing is, if you go too far towards only seeing the intuition part and guessing too much, or if you go too far and only seeing the facts and figures without taking a few guesses every once in a while, you're going to be in trouble. You have to have both. You have to have a middle ground. So now what you can do is you can take what we've talked about in the first section of the video and just now put those things together, and you'll see how each type generally views the world. So let's look at the sensor types. You have the SP types. So they are gathering, looking for the new information, but it's sensory, so it's the real world. So the SP types like to have actual new and different experiences, not so much taking in new concepts or learning new patterns, but just experiencing things in the world and maybe, you know, gathering new facts, for example. On the other hand, when you get an SJ type, they're trying to limit all the sensory. They're trying to just get things. That's why the SJs, ISTJs, ISFJs, for example, are very organized because they're really trying to limit. They're not gathering new sensory experiences or information. They're really taking it, cutting it all down, narrowing it down, getting it all in order, trying to limit new information coming in. Let's say if we have an ENFP, so we know they're a P-type, they like exploring. They like to gather more information. They don't like to stay with just what they know. And they're also an N-type, an intuitive, so they're looking less at like the concrete world and more at intuitive patterns, connections, the abstract meanings of things. So that would lead them to be just like jumping from intuitive guess to intuitive guess to see like, wow, what is going on here? I gotta find how all these different things are related and, you know, keep going and keep building on that and keep branching out. Now switch this around and look at that compared to, say, an INTJ, who is also intuitive, so they're seeing the abstract connections between things, but they're a J-type, so they're trying to narrow it all down. They're not looking for new connections. They're not looking to branch out. they're really looking to limit things and go over the same connections over and over again. So I've talked about, the NJ types before, having a mind sort of like a funnel where they're bringing the whole, concrete world down into like one intuitive understanding. And then the NP types are kind of the opposite of that, where it's like every little thing in the concrete world they're trying to blow up into as many intuitive possibilities as possible. So there you have it. Let me know any questions that you have down in the comments below. Once again, this video was sponsored by Trade Coffee. That link is down in the description. Thanks for watching. Till next time, stay cool and attractive.